Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a new story, The King of the Vigilantes, by GokuMuto. You can find author's profile link in the description. Let's begin One Piece plus My Hero Academia crossover. This is my new story for the One Piece and My Hero Academia fans. Here is what you should know about the story. The OC character is Luffy but does not have Luffy's personality. The OC will have all of Luffy's abilities. The OC is as strong as Luffy after Wano. Izuku Midoriya does not exist. Not that I hate Midoriya, I respect him as an anime protagonist. It's just that I want to try a story without him in it. And the OC will take Midoriya's place as the protagonist. That's all I have to say. Hope you enjoy my new story. The King of the Heroes, what the? A boy said, opened his eyes wondering where he was. He was sitting on a couch and looked around. He was in a room he had never seen before. It looked like an office. How did I end up here? He said, holding his head with his right hand, not remembering anything or how he got here. Soon his train of thought was broken when the door behind him opened. The boy turned around to see an old man with a beard, dressed in a black kimono. Ah, good. You awake? The old man said, walking to his desk before sitting down. Who are you and where am I? He demanded the old man's answer. The old man smiled without care and said, before I answer, let me ask you something first. Fine. He said in an irritated voice. What was the last thing you remember before waking up here? The old man asked. The boy thought really hard about his last moment before waking up. I was walking home from school, and I saw a little girl running into the street to get her toy ball, and then a car came driving down the street out of control. He said. Then his eyes widened in shock. The car was about to hit the girl and I ran to her, pushing her out of the way in time. But the car hit me and I died. He said the last part quickly. That right, you are dead. The old man said, rubbing his beard. I know it's too much to process for you right now, so take your time. He advised him. That girl. Is she okay? He asked the old man. Yes, she's perfectly fine, thanks to you. The old man said with a smiling nod. The boy sighs in relief knowing she is all right. So, since I'm dead, is this heaven? The boy asked. No. Nothing like that. The old man said. This place is the judgment room. Judgment room? He said in confusion. Yes. You see, when a person dies, their soul is brought here to this room to receive judgment. We are known as the judgment gods. The old said to the boy. You're a god? He asked. Yes, and a powerful one at that. The old man said with pride. Anyway, we look at the lives of the souls who come to this room and decide their fate. The boy listened closely. I looked into you and you lived a pretty decent life and died saving a little girl. So I will give you 3 choices. He said, holding up his hand with 3 fingers. And what are these choices? The boy asked him. One is that I can send your soul to heaven and you can live the rest of your eternity there in peace. He gave his first opinion. 2 is that I can reincarnate you back to your world, but you will lose your memories of your old life. The old man said. What's the 3rd choice? He asked. I will send you to a new world completely different from your old one. The old man said with a smile. You can do that? He said with widened eyes. Yes, and here's the thing. The world I will send you to will be a superhuman society. The old man said. A superhuman society? But why send me there? I don't have any powers. He said, not seeing the point. Yes, but if you do make the choice to go to the new world, I will give you powers so you can fit in there. The old man said, rubbing his bread again. So young man, have you decided on what you want? He asked the boy. He thought about it for a moment and came up with his answer. He knew what he wanted. I choose the third choice. He said to the god. Great. The god shouted happily. Now before I send you there, what powers do you want? He asked the boy. He thought about it and said. Have you ever heard of One Piece? Yes, I have actually. The old man said. You're not the only one whose memories I saw with that anime. That saves me the trouble of explaining it then. The boy thought. I want Luffy's devil fruit powers and the ability to use haki. He said. Interesting, so you want to have all the main characters' abilities. The old man asked to make sure he heard the boy right. The boy nodded to him in response. Very well, just give me a moment. The god said, holding his hand out, and in a flash of light, a purple fruit appeared in his hand. No way. Is that? The boy said in surprise. The old man giggled at the boy's reaction. Yes, this is the gum fruit. He said, handing the boy the devil fruit. Once you eat this fruit, you will have all of Luffy's powers and the ability to use all three hakis. The boy looked at the fruit and then took a bite. The moment his tongue hit the fruit, his eyes widened and his mouth puffed up in disgust. Oh! The boy was holding back the urge to vomit out the devil fruit. Ha 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 ha. The old man was laughing at the boy's reaction to eating the devil fruit. It was so hilarious. The boy used every bit of his willpower to swallow the fruit and succeed. That was disgusting. He yelled out loud before the gum fruit disappeared from his hand. You should have seen the look on your face, it was priceless. The old man said, still laughing. The boy was about to say something until he felt a great pain in his head, and all of Luffy's memories and experiences were now second nature to him. Ah, damn it. What the hell was that? He said, holding his head. Oh, right, I forgot to mention. I also added Luffy's memories and combat experiences to the gum fruit, so that you don't have a hard time using his techniques. He said to the boy. You couldn't have said that sooner. The boy said in anger. Sorry. The old man said, rubbing the back of his head in embarrassment. He just glared at him for a moment, before calming down. Anything I should know about this new world you're sending me to? He asked. It's a world where 80% of the human population gain an ability, known as quirks. There are some in this world who use their quirks for the sake of others, they are known as heroes. And there are those who use their quirks for their own selfish desires, they are known as villains. The old man explained the world to the boy. The boy took in the information he was told and understood what he was saying. It was basically a world full of superheroes and villains, and he was going to be sent there. I see. That was all the boy said. Do you have anything else you want to ask? The god asked. No, I'll figure out the rest on my own. He said, shaking his head. Now that has all been taken care of, I think it's time for you to go. The old man said, snapping his fingers, as the door behind them opened up and it was shining a white bright light from the outside. Just step outside the door and you will be sent to your new world. He said to the boy. He got up from the couch and walked to the door before stopping and turning to the old man. Thanks, I guess. He gives his things to the god. Don't mention it, it's my duty after all. The old man said. I wish you good luck in your new life. The boy nodded before walking out of the room. Now begins the journey of the King of the Heroes. One Piece plus My Hero Academia crossover Chapter 1, Brand New World Muzutafu Streets. Evening. After opening his eyes to meet the orange sky, the boy was lying on the ground and woke up in a back alley. The last thing he remembers was walking out of the judgment room and surrounded by a bright light, then passed out. I guess I'm in the new world the judgment god was talking about. The boy thought as he was looking around the alley. Well, no point sitting around here. He thought as he got up on his feet. As he did, he noticed a straw hat next to him. The boy picks it up and sees a letter on the inside of the hat, that says, Read me. Weird. That was all he thought until the boy saw a broken mirror and saw his own reflection, which shocked him in surprise. "What the hell?" he shouted in disbelief. He has black shaggy hair, round black eyes, and a slightly muscular build. He wears short, blue trousers with cuffs, sandals, and a sleeveless red vest open revealing his chest. He also has a scar with 2 stitches underneath his left eye and a large X-shaped scar on his chest with a six-pack. In other words, he looks like Monkey D. Luffy. Why do I look like Luffy? He asked himself but noticed something else about wrong. I don't just look like him, I sound like him too. The boy said, realizing his voice sounded different as well. He also looks a little younger than he should be. Okay, calm down. There has to be a reason for all of this, he said, trying to calm himself down. If he had to guess, it was the gods doing for his new appearance. He then took a look at the letter and opened it up to read what was written on it. Dear young man, I hope you enjoying your new body. I figure since you have Luffy's powers you should look like him as well. And I also gave you a straw hat that looks exactly like Luffy's. You can't be Straw Hat Luffy with a straw hat, right? Anyway, you noticed that you look a little younger than what you looked like back in your old world. So I reverted you back to a 13-year-old. Don't ask me why, I have my reason for it. I also gave you the ability to understand different languages, so you won't have trouble with where you are right now. This is the last time you will hear from me, what you do now is entirely up to you now. Best of luck to you. From the Judgment God. After reading what was in the letter, it disappeared from his hands in a flash of light. Guess he doesn't want anyone to know of his existence. The boy just sighs to himself about this whole thing and just accepts it. What's done is done, and there's nothing he can do to change it. So I'm Luffy now, he said to look in the broken mirror again. He then pulled the right side of his cheeks and it stretched at an inhuman length. And it looks like I am made of RBB, he said out of curiosity and let go of his stretchy cheek. I can test out more of my abilities later. First I need to figure out where I am, he said, as he buttoned up his vest and was about to walk out the alley until he looked at his straw hat. The boy then put the straw hat on his head and for some reason, it felt comfortable. It does feel right without where it is. With that, the straw hat boy made his way out of the alley. As he got out of the alley, the boy wanted to get a good view of everything that was around him and hoped that he'd figure out where he was. He looked at the people, the buildings, the billboards, and banners that were laid out across the city. It was then that the boy realized something. Nothing was in English, the language was Japanese. Everything around him was written in Japanese. All the people around him were speaking in Japanese too. But the craziest thing about this was he could understand them. The writing and the language, he can understand them perfectly clearly like he's been doing this all his life. The boy was confused about this for a moment until he realized that the Judgment God did mean that he gave him the ability to understand different languages. That would explain how he can read and understand Japanese. He then looked at the people around him, they looked pretty normal. He noticed that some of them didn't look that human. There was a woman who had fur on most of her body and kind of looked like a tiger, a man with a rocky body wearing a business suit, a little boy who had an eyeball in the middle of his forehead, and many others with different features. The Judgment God did said to him that this world was a superhuman society and everyone called their powers quirks. So this is what a superhuman society looks like. The boy thought as he was walking around the city. It looks like something he would see in an anime or manga. He then made his way into a very big park with lots of trees and a walking path. As the boy was walking by a trash can he saw a newspaper in it. He knew this was a perfect way to gather more information and take it out of the trash can. Come on, give me something good, he said, opening the newspaper and reading what was on it. It looks like he was in Japan, no surprises there. It was the year 2321, that took him by surprise. It was 300 years ahead in the future of his old world. Despite that, everything looks pretty normal and non-futuristic except for quirks. Then he saw something on Pro Heroes. A rabbit hero calling herself Mirko took on 7 villains handily and won, a fat hero calling himself Fat Gum helping the police bust a small-time drag trafficking business, and a winged hero calling himself Hawk saving a group of people from a collapsing building. He read other things in the articles, but it looks like he won't get any more info out of this newspaper. Okay, so I'm in Japan, which would explain to the Japanese that this world is 300 years ahead of mine. There are people with superpowers, and some of them are heroes and villains here too. The boy said, putting the newspaper back in the garbage. His eyes were closed and he took a deep sigh. Why does it feel like I just got ice sky? He asked himself. He just shook his head and left the park. Muzutafu streets, night. The lengthy streets of Muzutafu are packed with people walking to and from their destinations, with people leading their lives as normal as they always have been. Tall street lights shone brightly over the streaming traffic, and tall buildings could be seen everywhere as far as the eye could see. Breaths were visible in the chilly night air, as a sense of peace was instilled within all of the civilians because they knew if conflict ever arose, a nearby hero would easily come and save the day. When living in a society full of quirks, heroes, and villains, peace is something that can be broken pretty easily, as quickly as a blink of an eye. A resounding explosion went off near a bank entrance. Many people were blown off their feet from the impact and fell on the road. Cars swerved around, nearly crashing into each other with their sirens wailing in the thin air. Chaos ensued as all civilians in a half-mile radius around the explosion started panicking their heads off, running into the streets without care about where they were going. At the bank entrance, a large figure stood up with a steel rod about 10 meters in length in one hand, and what looked to be a heavy gun of some sort in the other. He wore a mask with the face of a lion painted on it. He climbed to his feet and started to laugh maniacally. Ha 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 ha. No one can stop me with this quirk that I have. Bring it on, heroes. The masked villain shouted. The yells of the civilians running away could be heard from a long way away, and some of the words could be heard over the chaos. What's happening? A man said in confusion. Run. Another person shouted. Where the hell are the heroes? An old man said. Someone can be a hero. A woman screams in fear. On the exterior, the man was simply crazy, and without a care of what his actions were causing. On the inside, it was a completely different story. Good, I announced myself to all of the heroes. Now all the attention will be on me, no one will notice anything inside the bank. While the heroes take care of me, all the money will be up and gone. The masked villain thought as if everything was going according to plan. He looked around and there were no heroes in sight. Seriously, no one. Ha ha ha. What the hell is all that bravery now? He said in a taunting tone. While the villain was attempting his distraction from the bank onto him, a large dragon-like figure that was camouflaged by the clouds was flying towards the scene as fast as she could. She is Ryuko Tatsuma, also known as the Dragoon Hero, Ryukyu. She is the number 9 pro hero in Japan. Her body is transformed into that of a large, winged dragon with pale gray scales, although she still has the same skin tone, hair, and eyes. Her hero costume remains visible bar her boots, and the claws that were on her face have transferred to her right hand, due to her quirk. While Ryukyu was in her dragon form, her eyesight could be on par with that of a hawk's, but that didn't change the fact that it would take a while to get to the scene. It's going to take me about 10 minutes to get there, 7 if I really push it. I have no idea how much damage the villain might cause. Ryukyu thought, scanning the area around the destruction zone. She didn't see anyone close by, they had all fled thankfully. There was no one around that would prevent her from using more of her strength. That was one downside of her dragon quirk. While it was extremely powerful, it was also easy to destroy large amounts of area and cause millions of yen in property damage. She had to learn to limit her power so she wouldn't destroy everything in sight. As she was monitoring the movements of the villain and everything around the area, she noticed something in the alleyways. It was in front of the villain. A hero. No, it looked like a child walking towards the villain. What in the world is that child doing? Not good, I need to save him before he gets killed. Ryukyu then flew down to the alleyway before it was too late. A few moments ago, after a few minutes of walking around, it was getting darker and the street lights started to turn on. He had no idea what to do next or where to go. So what am I going to do now? I have no home to go to, no money to sleep at a hotel, he said, walking down the street until his stomach started to growl from hunger. And to top it all off, I'm hungry, he said, holding his stomach with his head down. Yup, things cannot get any worse for him. Until he felt something with his observation hockey. Ha! The boy then shot his head up in confusion, he felt something dangerous coming. Then a resounding explosion shook everything around him. The trees started to shake, tilting to a dangerous angle. Windows shattered, its shards flying everywhere. The dirt rose up and started to blow like sand in a sandstorm. The boy was nearly blown off of his feet, but it didn't faze him that much. He firmly put his back foot down and put his hands in front of his face to stop the wind and sand from streaming into his unprotected eyes, feeling his footing being a lot more secure. Luckily his straw hat didn't fly off his head, instead, the string on it was wrapped around his neck, keeping it from flying away. Then, the screaming started. Strained yells assaulted his ears. People were running past him, hoping to get to safety. What just caused that explosion just now? The boy wondered, putting his hands down to see what was happening. His straw hat was resting on his back with the string holding it wrapped around his neck. He started to run towards all the noise, which was just getting louder and louder, and ignored the people he passed. He noticed that he was running faster than what he normally did back in his old body. Not only that, but he wasn't getting tired at all despite how fast he was moving. Maybe because he has Luffy's body now and all of his superhuman abilities and stamina. Ignoring this fact, the boy increased his speed to get to the scene faster. He was running through a maze of alleyways, guided only by the screaming of the civilians, which seemed to get even louder. That's when he heard a deep, crazed voice. Ha 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 ha. No one can stop me with this quirk that I have. Bring it on, heroes. The masked man shouted crazily. The voice was quite loud, loud enough so that anyone in the vicinity could hear it loud and clear, and pinpoint its location. There was no logic behind why someone would do that, it would only make their plans a lot harder, but the Straw Hat Boy didn't have the luxury to worry about what he might have been thinking. It's just ahead. I'm almost there, he thought, running through the alley. The wind once again hit his face as he found the exit to the alleyway and ran outside. He stepped outside and stopped to see his surroundings, and his eyes widened. Buildings were decimated, cars flipped over, and fire coated nearly every piece of material that was flammable. Everywhere he looked, there was destruction. All except one tall building with the words Muzutafu City Bank over it. A tall man with a lion's mask, carrying a pole in one hand and in his other hand his revolver. The boy's eyes narrowed at the man, and could immediately tell that he was the person responsible for all this destruction. And for some reason, it set him off. Then he begins to walk out of the alleyway, straight towards the villain. The masked villain heard the crunching of the Straw Hat Boy's feet as he came out of the alleyway, and turned his gaze towards him. What the hell? This isn't a place for children like you, boy. I suggest you run as far away from here as you can, he said. The boy said nothing and just kept on walking. His head was down slightly with his bangs covering his eyes and both of his fists were clenched. Right in front of him was an armed and dangerous villain, empty-handed and nowhere to run. Every decision that this man made could put people in danger. He knew the chances of danger and was ready to face it. Despite the situation, he keeps his cool, with no fear whatsoever. He stopped just about 15 feet away from the villain. Why? The boy asked in a low tone. Ich, that was all the masked villain said. Why are you doing all this? The boy said, revealing an angry look on his face, with anger in his voice. Look around you. Look at all the destruction here, how many lives you've hurt, and for what? He asked, waving his arm around the area with the destruction the villain caused. The villain just looked at him and started to laugh like a maniac. He stopped and stared him, right in the eyes. Now is not the time for a little kid to play hero. It's also none of your business why I do what I do, nor is it your role to understand it. Now, leave and don't bother me. As villainous as I am, it still leaves a bad taste in my mouth to PND up a kid. He warned the boy to move out of his way. The boy's eyes perked up and hardened while he said that. The people around you didn't deserve this. They had nothing to do with you. But yet, you dragged them into your rampage. He yelled back at the villain. You're still going on. Just get out of here, you goddamn wannabe hero. I don't care about what I did, and I don't have time for this. The villain said in annoyance. He didn't have time to deal with this brat. You're not going anywhere after what you did. The boy said in a serious tone. Oh, and why is that? The masked villain asked, narrowing his eyes. The boy just cracked his knuckles and looked at the villain with an intense gaze and said. Because I'm going to kick your butt. At this point, the villain had enough of the straw hat boy nonsense. TCH, fine. If you want to die so badly, then be my guest, kid. He shouted, as the mask then ran towards the boy to attack him. Up above, Ryukyu flew down to get to the straw hat boy in time before it was too late. SHT, I won't make it in time. She thought, rushing at her top speed. The villain thinks that the straw hat boy won't be able to do anything, but that is a big mistake. He then uses his pole to hit the boy, but the straw hat boy then grabs the pole with his left hand, stopping the attack. What? The masked villain incredulously said with his eyes widened. He wasn't the only one surprised by this. Ryukyu stopped in her tracks when she witnessed what the boy did. It completely took her by surprise. The straw hat boy still holding the pole in his hand. He shows no signs of it hurting or affecting him. You think you could kill me with a weak butt attack like this? He said in a neutral tone. The boy then used his right hand to hit the masked villain in the stomach. Arg! The villain screamed in pain. The punch was so strong that the villain then bounced back until he hit the wall of a building. Ryukyu was shocked to see this scene. That punch was powerful enough to send the villain flying away from the boy. She didn't think that the boy was capable of doing such a feat. It wasn't impossible or uncommon for a person to do. She had seen many other pro heroes and villains able to pull something like that off, but never seen a child who was able to do anything like that. The boy was a bit surprised with how strong he was now. He didn't even put that much effort into his attack, but it was able to do that much damage. Okay, I can get used to this. The boy thought with a grin while looking at his hand. The villain then got up from the rubble of the building and looked at the boy in pain while holding his stomach. He didn't know that kid's punch could hurt him like this. DMN, he's not a normal kid. That punch was strong enough to do this much damage to me. He must have some kind of strength enhancement quirk. He thought, breathing heavily. I don't have time to play games with him, I'll finish him off now. The villain then pointed the revolver at the boy. Time to die, kid. He shouted, aiming at the kid. Ryukyu, who saw this, panicked and rushed at the villain, but she was too late. He pulled the trigger of his revolver. The bullet went straight towards the boy. But to him, the bullet was moving very slowly, and thanks to his observation haki he was able to read where the bullet was flying. He simply tilted his head to the side and the bullet flew past him. How the hell did I miss? The masked villain keeps firing his gun hoping to get a hit in. The straw hat boy keeps on dodging every single one of the bullets with his observation haki. This stunned both the villain and Ryukyu. He dodged all of those bullets like they were nothing. Is that all? He asked in a bored tone. You way too slow. TTT, that's impossible, there's no way you avoided every single shot. The villain said in disbelief, as he took a few steps back. I'll show you what a real pistol looks like. The Straw Hat Boy said as he pulled his right arm behind him. Gum gum, and how do you plan to punch me from their straw hat? The villain asked, being a little bit afraid. Pistol. The boy's arm stretched, heading straight for the villain. The masked villain was so stunned that he forgot to dodge. The boy's fist made direct contact with his face, destroying his mask and knocking him back to the ground. Unlike his last punch, this one was twice as strong. The villain was now failing on the ground, holding on to his face, as the boy's punch was strong enough to break his nose. Ryukyu was a little surprised by this. She had never seen a quirk that had let anyone stretch their arms like that before. He's no ordinary child. She thought, seeing how well the boy was doing against the villain. Her attitude turned back to the villain, who was down and saw the perfect chance for her to strike. SHT SHT SHT, it hurts. He broke my nose. The villain holding his broken nose in pain. If you know what's good for you, you'll stay down. The boy warned the villain. Damn it. I underestimated him because he was a kid. He then looked at the boy, who stared him down with an angry look. Screw the money, I need to get out of here now before a hero shows up. If that happens, it's over for me. The villain thought as got back on his foot to make a break for it when a large gust of wind nearly blew him off his feet. He staggered and turned around, and in his peripheral vision, he saw a large, dark figure in the shape of a dragon gliding over to his location. He wasn't the only one shocked by the appearance. The boy was also surprised by the dragon. Is that a dragon? There are dragons in this world. The boy thought in surprise. The villain regained his footing and started to take a mad dash to the cover of a building, but he wasn't fast enough. Oh, CRP. He thought. Ryukyu raised her paw, knocked him off balance, and subsequently knocked him unconscious. She landed on the ground next to the villain and checked to see if he was unconscious. Confirming that he was out cold, Ryukyu then turned her attention to the Straw Hat Boy, who was staring at her. The boy noticed this and got into Luffy's fighting stance, ready to defend himself. Whoa, easy young man. I'm not going to hurt you. Ryukyu said, holding her claw up in defense. Oh yeah, then prove it. He said to her, not letting his guard down. Ryukyu in response disabled her quirk, and started to shrink in size, all the way back to her human form. She is a woman who looks in her early 20s, with chin-length blonde hair, which she wears swept back with a headband, a long fringe over the right side of her face, covering her eyes. She has thin, yellow, inward-tilting eyes with slit pupils and notably sharp teeth. She is wearing consists of a dark red, traditional qipao with a pale green scale trim around her shoulders, which seems to only be slit on the left side, with yellow claw patterns on the bottom and smaller ones around her neck. She wears knee-high boots and a strap around her exposed thigh. She wears long, almost sleeve-like white gloves that nearly reach her shoulders, with higher tabs on the outer sides, and they expose her hands from the wrist. She wearing a matching green headband with 4 large, pale purple claws attached, covering the right side of her face, and a set of small black dragon wings protrude from the back of her head, with a number of gold-spiked cartilage piercings decorating her left ear. The boy just looked at her with his eyes widened. So that dragon was human. He thought, putting his fists down. Wait, if she was able to turn into a dragon, it must be her quirk. He forgot that this world was a superhuman society for a moment. See, you can trust me, Ryukyu said with a smile, walking towards the Straw Hat Boy as he was blushing from her beauty. I'm the Dragoon hero, Ryukyu. She's pretty. The boy thought, still blushing. He'd never met such a appealing woman before in his life. Are you all right? Your face is red. She asked, leading in closer to him. The boy just snapped out of his thoughts and backed up a little from her. I am fine. He said, looking the other way from her. Ryukyu just slightly chuckles at his reaction. Well, I'm happy to hear that. She said. Before anything else was said, ambulances, police cars, and pro-heroes were on the scene. The heroes and ambulances were helping injured people who got caught up in the villain's rampage. The police officers were dragging the unconscious villain into custody and putting him in the back of an armored truck. A police officer then appeared in Ryukyu. "It's an honor to meet you in person, Ryukyu," the officer said to the pro. "There's no need to be formal with me," she said, being a little embarrassed. "Right, anyway, exactly, work on taking down the villain. I guess I shouldn't expected anything less from the number 9 hero." The officer complimented her on a job well done. "It was nothing really," Ryukyu said. "But I did have a little help." She hesitated to say the last part. "Oh, really? Did another hero assist you in the villain's capture?" the police officer asked. "No, it was him," Ryukyu said, pointing at the straw hat boy, who was looking at the pro-heroes helping the injured. The police officer's eyes widened in shock from hearing that. "You're telling me a child helped you fight the villain?" "Well, no. He was already fighting the villain before I arrived. In fact, I'm pretty sure he could have defeated the villain even if I didn't show up," Ryukyu said to the officer. He's that strong?" the officer asked in curiosity. "The villain was already hurt before I knocked him unconscious, and I saw the child fight. It was like watching a pro at work," Ryukyu said, telling the officer what she witnessed. The boy was unbelievably strong for his age, and he was able to dodge gunfire. That's something that most heroes couldn't pull off. When she watched the boy fighting the villain, she didn't see any fear in him at all. He stood his ground against the villain and gave her a chance to easily take him down. Whoever he was not a regular child. The officer was surprised to hear that from one of the top 10 heroes, but shook that thought aside. "I see, that's interesting to hear, Ryukyu. But that doesn't change the fact that he committed vigilantism," he said, tightening his hat. Ryukyu just frowned upon hearing that. She admitted that the boy was strong and skilled for his age, but he broke the law and had to be punished for it. "It pains me to arrest a child after what he did, but the law is the law," the police officer sighs. "All right, let's go begin him in," he said before walking over to the straw hat boy with Ryukyu right behind him. Meanwhile, the boy was watching the pro-heroes, police officers, and ambulances at work, cleaning up from the damage that the villain caused. "I just hope nobody got seriously hurt from all of this," he thought with his arms crossed. A world full of heroes and villains. People who use their powers to help others or for their own selfish desires. This was the new world he was living in now, and it was something he had to get used to. His thoughts were broken when he noticed a police officer and Ryukyu walking towards him. "Excuse me, young man," the officer said to him. "Yes," the boy answered back. "We would like to thank you for your help, young man. That was very brave of you to hold off the villain until Ryukyu arrived." He thanked the boy by bowing down to him. "Yeah, sure, it wasn't really a big deal," the boy said, not making a big deal out of it. "However, you shouldn't have intervened. It was really dangerous for a boy to do the job of a pro-hero. You could have got hurt or worse, killed," the officer said, sounding deadly serious with a frown on his face. The boy just looked at the officer in surprise. "What? You're still a young boy and civilian. It's our job to defend people like you. What you did was extremely reckless, even if you did help stop the villain," the officer responded, still with the same tone and expression. "What the hell? Why are you scolding me for helping?" the boy shouted back in anger. "Because what you did was against the law," the officer answered. "What do you mean against the law?" he asked. That surprised both the police officer and Ryukyu. He didn't know anything about quirk restriction laws at his age. The officer just coughed in his hand and said, "It's against the law for an individual to use their quirk to harm another person without a license." He explained to him. "You illegally used your powers without permission to cause harm to the villain, which would be considered vigilantism," he said, repeating the quirk restriction laws. Therefore you just broke the law and sadly that means that you're under arrest. The boy's eyes widened in shock but were soon replaced with anger. That bullshit. So you're saying you're arresting me for stopping that guy from hurting even more innocent people? The boy asked, still in an angry tone. Yes. The officer said. Like I said, you broke the law and must be punished. To the boy, it was completely bullshit. He just stopped a dangerous villain from hurting any more civilians and he was getting arrested for his actions. He did the right thing and this is what he gets in return. What the EFF man? I did nothing wrong. The boy argued and shouted back at the officer. Calm down now, we can clear things up if you come with us to the station, don't make things worse for yourself. The police officer said to him calmly. Ryukyu didn't say anything. She just felt sorry for the young boy. But as a pro-hero herself, she can understand the dangers of what this boy did and the consequences of his actions. And what happens if I don't come with you? The boy said, dangerously narrowing his eyes at the cop. The officer took that as a threat and answered. Then we will have no choice but to use force. The police officer said in a serious tone. And even if you do somehow manage to escape from here, you would be labeled as a criminal and every pro-hero in the country will be after you. He said, adding the last part to get the boy to see reason. At that point the boy was furious. It was either go with them and be arrested or run away and labeled as a criminal. Even if he does run, he has nowhere to go and still doesn't know much about this world. But getting arrested for such a stupid reason didn't sit right with him either. So, should I go with them or fight back? He thought, gritting his teeth with his head down. Then he felt a hand touched his shoulder. When he looked up, it was Ryukyu. Please just do as the officer says. The last thing I want to do is fight a child. Ryukyu begged the boy. She was no fan of violence when it came to hurting children. The boy just looks her in the eyes and can tell she doesn't want to fight him. And truth be told, he didn't want to fight her either. He then calms down and lets out a heavy sigh. Then turned his attention back to the police officer. Fine, but only because she asked me to. He said, still being a little sad about the whole situation. Thank you, Ryukyu said with a smile. Whatever. That was all the boy said to her. He didn't know why, but for some reason, he couldn't say no to her. The boy was then put into the back of the police car, along with Ryukyu, who was accompanying them to the police station. His first day in this world and got arrested for doing the right thing. What a huge pain in the butt. One Piece plus My Hero Academia crossover Chapter 2, Your Name Yuzurifu Police Station. Night. It didn't take too long for Ryukyu and the Straw Hat Boy to arrive at the police station. The full moon hung above their heads as the sound of the city filled their ears. Ryukyu stayed close to the Straw Hat Boy, wanting to make sure nothing happened. He was quiet during the entire ride. She noticed he had an annoyed look on his face. She can probably understand why, he just got arrested for stopping a villain. So it's understandable that he'd be upset. He probably wouldn't have come along to the station, if Ryukyu hadn't convinced him to. After entering the station's building, the boy was taken to the interrogation room for questioning. All right, young man, come with me. The officer said to him. The boy just looked at him with a glare but did as he said. Then he followed the officer. Ryukyu just gave him one last look before giving her a report on the villain's capture and the Straw Hat Boy. After a few minutes of explaining what happened at the bank, she heard someone call her. It's good to see you again, Ryukyu. A man said, getting her attention. Ryukyu recognized the voice and turned to him. It was the Naomasa Tsukachi, a detective of the Mizurifu police force. He is a tall man with short, black hair and somewhat rectangular black eyes. He is wearing a white long-sleeved button-up shirt and black pants. It's good to see you again too, Detective Tsukachi, Ryukyu said to him. As much as I love to catch up, I need to speak with the boy you bought in, Tsukachi said, heading to the room to talk to the child. Ryukyu followed behind him to see what was going to happen to the child. So, how is he? Ryukyu asked in curiosity. He's been pretty quiet and behaving well. But I can tell he doesn't look very happy. Tsukachi said. Being a detective for years, he can read people's expressions. Ryukyu just frowned upon hearing that. But there wasn't much she could do about it. He's inside this room, Tsukachi said as they reached a room door and went inside. The room was in fact separated into two. The area the three just entered had chairs, a machine that had speakers plugged in, and a window that showed the Straw Hat Boy on the other side of the room. The window was designed in a way that the people in the first room could see the ones in the second room but those in the second couldn't see them. Two officers were already inside the room, keeping a close eye on the boy. Anything happen while I was gone? Tsukachi asked the two. Nope, the kid has just been sitting there doing nothing. The female officer said to him. Hasn't said a single word either. The male officer added. Tsukachi just looked in the other room where the boy was. His eyes were closed and arm crossed on his chest, and his straw hat was on his back, just the same sight as he left the room. Alright, we can take it from here. You two go take a break. He said to the two officers and they began exiting the room. Leaving both him and Ryukyu alone to deal with the Straw Hat Boy. So what's the plan? Ryukyu asked the detective. Simple, I'm gonna interrogate him. Didn't want to start till you were here though. The detective wanted to know more about the boy's situation before he started the interrogation. So can you fill me in on what happened at the bank? He asked. Well, you see, then Ryukyu began to explain in detail what happened from seeing the boy encounter the villain to her knocking the villain unconscious. Tsukachi took in the information she told him and wrote it down in his notepad. I see, so he engaged the villain and you had to intervene to keep him from hurting himself, Tsukachi said with a frown, thinking over everything she told him. It sounds like the boy committed vigilantism. As a detective working with the law, Naomasa is strict and does not approve of vigilantism, which, despite having heroic intentions, is still illegal and therefore makes them villains. While he can understand what the boy was trying to do, it still does change the fact that he broke the law. From what you told me, it looks like he was putting up a good fight against the villain, Tsukachi said looking at his notepad. Yes. She said with her arms crossed under her melons. He's able to dodge gunfire without much issue, stretch his arm at an incredible length, and strong enough to put the villain down by himself with a single punch, Ryukyu said remembering the fight. He sounds like an interesting individual. But that does not excuse his actions. Tsukachi said in a professional tone. Ryukyu then turns her attention back to him. You might want to prepare yourself, Tsukachi. He doesn't look very happy. She warned him. Yes, I'm aware of that. Which is why it would be best if I came in friendly with a good cop type of attitude. Tsukachi grabbed his cup of coffee and made his posture look more relaxed. Wish me luck. He said to Ryukyu before heading to the other room. The Straw Hat Boy was in the interrogation room waiting for something to happen. The officer just told him to wait there until the detective shows up. There was a metal table and two pairs of chairs on both sides of the table and there was of course a window that looked like a mirror. He can sense the pressure of multiple people right behind the window due to his observation hockey. It's been over 15 minutes of waiting for someone to show up. And it was annoying, to say the least. This SCKS. The boy thought with his eyes closed and arms crossed. I can't believe they arrested me just for stopping that guy. If I had known this world had such dumb laws like this, I would have just stayed in my world. He thought in annoyance. I should have just ran for it. Why did I decide to come here again? He's trying to remember why he came here again. Then an image of Ryukyu flashed in his thoughts, which caused him to open his eyes and blush a little. Damn it, what the hell is wrong with me? He thought until he felt the presence of someone behind the door. The door opened to reveal Tsukachi, who was holding a cup of coffee. Hello. Tsukachi said with a friendly smile. My name is Naomasa Tsukachi, I'm a detective here in the police force. May I have your name? He asked. The boy didn't say anything, he just gave him a glare. Okay, you mind telling me how old you are? He changes the question. Once again he said nothing. Tsukachi just frowned a little from his silence. Can you at least tell me who your parents are? The boy just stared at him with the same expression on his face. He had no intention of saying anything to them after they arrested him for helping others. Which is goddamn stupid. The detective couldn't help but sigh over the fact that this conversation wasn't going anywhere. Listen, young man. I understand that you are upset, but believe me when I say I'm trying to help you. Tsukachi said with sincerity. What you did is dangerous, kid, I'm not sure you realize that. The thing is, the boy does. He knew it was dangerous for him to challenge the villain from the start and could have gotten himself killed. But seeing how that villain was causing all that destruction and not giving a damn about his actions, just made him angry. The boy just narrowed his eyes in response to what he said. Which caused the detective to flinch. He was just a child, but that look in his eyes could tell Tsukachi that he was not an ordinary kid. The look in his eyes reminded him of All Might when he was serious. Not to mention he was beating a B-ranked villain single-handedly before Ryukyu arrived. The detective regained his composure and then spoke. Look, young man, I'm trying to help you and you not saying anything isn't helping your case here, Tsukachi said. I'm pretty sure your parents are worried sick about you right now. Do you want to put that kind of stress on them? He asked the boy. That wouldn't be much of a problem if he had parents. He never knew who his parents were back in his old life and it makes no difference now. The boy can see what the detective was trying to do and he was going to fall for it. So he just closed his eyes and chose to ignore the detective. Young man. The detective called out to the boy, not getting an answer. Young man, are you gonna answer any of my questions? He asked. But the straw hat boy ignored his words and continued to stay quiet. Tsukachi just sighed in response. It seems like the boy does not intend to cooperate with him. Excuse me. Was all the detective said as he got up and left the room. Detective Tsukachi closed the door and was welcomed by Ryukyu giving him a concerned look on her face. So, Ryukyu began. No luck, huh? No, Tsukachi said shaking his head in disappointment. He just doesn't want to open up. I saw. He doesn't look like he's in the mood to talk to anyone. Ryukyu said. I think him being arrested might have caused this. If I can't get him to talk, we won't be able to figure out who he is, Tsukachi said with his eyes closed. It wasn't anything new to him that criminals he questioned refused to talk, but somehow he managed to get them to talk. But this time was a different story. He didn't want to ruin the future of a child by helping others, even if it was against the law. Maybe I should try playing the bad cop to get him to talk, Tsukachi said, not liking going down this route. I think that might have the opposite effect. Ryukyu said to Tsukachi. What do you mean? Tsukachi asked her. Back before we came here, he was pretty upset about getting arrested for fighting the villain. If I hadn't convinced him to come with me, he would have probably run for it or fought back. Ryukyu said, remembering how angry he was back at the scene. Tsukachi's eyes slightly widened from hearing that. Are you serious? Yes. She nodded. And let me tell you, if we would have fought, I doubt that it would have ended well for anyone. Tsukachi was surprised to hear this. He remembered what Ryukyu told him about what the child was capable of, so if he fought back he would cause a lot of chaos. Not only that, but the look in his eyes was that of a dangerous person that nobody wanted to mess with. So making him any more angry than he is now might make things worse. So our best course of action is to try and calm him down. Ryukyu suggests. I see, if we can get him to trust us, he might start opening up. Tsukachi said with his hand on his chin. It's a start, but who can we get to make him open up? Ryukyu asked. How about you? Tsukachi said, surprising the heroine. Me. Ryukyu said with her eyes slightly widened. From what you told me, it seems like you're the only person he'll listen to, Tsukachi said. No, only that, but you do have a soft spot when it comes to children. He said with a smile. Ryukyu just slightly blushed in embarrassment. It's true she has a soft spot for kids, and getting angry when one is being abused or hurt. If anyone can get the Straw Hat Boy opened up, it's her. Okay, I'll try my best, Ryukyu said with a sigh before heading to the room. When the door opened, the boy was expecting the detective to come right back in. He was a bit surprised to see it was someone else. It was Ryukyu. She gave him a friendly wave before sitting down on a chair across from him. Hi there, Ryukyu said in a friendly tone. It was good to see you again. What do you want? The boy said, not caring about his tone. Are you here to ask me questions? The number 9 hero can see that he wanted to get straight to the point and decided not to waste any time. Sort of, but I wanted to thank you before anything else, Ryukyu said to him. This statement left him confused. For what? He said with a raised eyebrow. For keeping those civilians safe, Ryukyu said with a heartfelt smile. I was only a few minutes away before I reached the scene. But you delayed the villain long enough for me to get there in the nick of time. Like I said before, it was nothing. He said, not trying to make a big deal out of this. So those people. Are they okay? He asked, remembering the damage caused by the villain and injured people. From what I heard, there was no deaths and some were pretty banged up, but they'll make a full recovery. She said, making his worries go away. That's good to know. He said, sighing in relief. I didn't get the chance to ask this, but why did you decide to fight the villain? Ryukyu asked the boy. The boy didn't know what to say to her. But he just said the first thing he could think of. That guy just really set me off. The way he just hurt all of those people and not giving a DMN about it. People like that just make me sick. He said in an irritated tone. You fought him because he set you off. I'm sorry, but you can't expect me to believe that after what I've seen. Ryukyu shook her head in disbelief. So you just expected me to stand there and watch then? He asked her. This takes the Dragoon hero by surprise. If I hadn't stepped in, even more people could have gotten hurt or killed. He said to her in a dead serious tone. If I did nothing to stop that villain, I would have regretted it for the rest of my life. Ryukyu was a bit surprised by his answer and asked. This isn't the first time this happened, has it? What happened? He asked. You saving someone in danger. She said, trying to understand his reason. His mind flashes back to the time he saved that little girl from a hit and run. No, it isn't. He softly said to her. Was this someone close to you? Ryukyu asked. No, just some random person. He said, shaking his head. Why did you save them? Were you expecting some kind of reward for helping them? She asked him. No, I didn't do it because I was expecting something in return. He said with a serious expression on his face. I did it because it was the right thing to do. He said to her. Ryukyu didn't know what to say at this point. He risked his life to fight a dangerous villain because it was the right thing to do. Ryukyu could tell this boy had the heart of a hero, and with how strong he was, he would make an amazing hero someday. What a kind-hearted child. Ryukyu thought with a small smile. Excuse me. She said, standing up. The boy watched the older woman leave the room. Leaving the boy alone and a bit perplexed. He heard talking on the other side of the wall, but he couldn't make out exactly what was being said. About 10 minutes later, Tsukachi had come back into the room, and Ryukyu was right next to him. What is it now? He asked the both of them. Young man, I listened to your conversation with Ryukyu. You've been through a lot, haven't you, kid? Tsukachi said to the boy. Not really. I just got here. The boy said, not causing his words carefully. This got both the adult attention. What do you mean you just got here? The detective asked him. The boy's eyes widened from realizing what he said. It's not, just forget it. He said, trying to avoid the answer. Young man, me and Ryukyu want to help you, Tsukachi spoke. I don't know what you're hiding, but I do know is that we can't help you if you don't talk to us. The boy's eyes softened from hearing that and just looked at the detective. Please just talk to us. If you have a problem, we can help you with it. Ryukyu pleaded with him to talk with him. The boy just looked down, not knowing what to do. He was still angry about being arrested, but they were still willing to talk to him. He can't just say he came here from another world. That would just make him sound crazy and they would believe him. The big question was, what was he going to do next? Even if I told you, I doubt you would believe me. He said to them in a low tone. I don't think that would be much of a problem, Tsukachi said with a smile on his face. Why's that? He asked the detective. You see, my quirk allows me to tell if a person is lying or not, Tsukachi told him about his quirk's ability. The boy's eyes widened in disbelief from hearing that. Your quirk can actually do that? The boy said to Tsukachi. Tsukachi nodded to the straw hat boy. He's known as the human lie detector. No lie can get past him. Ryukyu said in confidence about her friend's ability. The boy's opinions were limited. He knew he wouldn't survive long in this world, without help. He had no place to call home, no money, and didn't know anything about this world. He just sighed to himself and spoke. All right, you win. Getting both Tsukachi and Ryukyu's attention. All talk. He said. Tsukachi and Ryukyu just gave a bright smile to what he said. Looks like he's ready to open up to them. That's good to hear, young man. Now can you please start by telling me your name? Tsukachi asked, readying his notepad. My name. The boy thought in curiosity. He then looked back at his straw hat hanging from his back and came up with an idea. New world, new me, I guess. He thought, knowing what to say to the detective. He opened his mouth to say his name. My name is Monkey D. Luffy. The straw hat boy said. Detective Tsukachi looked through his notes inside his office. The questioning had gone rather smoothly and ended about half an hour ago. Right now he was waiting inside the lobby eating some takeout food that they ordered from him because he meant that he hadn't had anything to eat all day. So, what now? Ryukyu asked as they were inside Tsukachi's office. Isn't that the question of the day? Thanks to his quirk, the detective was able to tell that Luffy was lying when he wasn't. The kid already knew that and because of that answered almost all of his questions. The ones who didn't want to answer would just keep quiet. Still, they learned a lot from this kid and just how bad of a situation he was in. Name, Monkey D. Luffy, age 13 years old, lives in America. He has no knowledge about his parents which left him homeless, doesn't have anywhere to go. No home, no relatives, nowhere to go, and became a drifter. Tsukachi didn't think that the Straw Hat Boy's life was this bad until he checked the database for any type of record of the kid. But no matter how much he looks, there was absolutely nothing. No BRTH certificate, no ID, no address, absolutely nothing. It's almost as if he doesn't even exist. Did you find anything on his parents? What are their names? Ryukyu asked as she was trying her best to put things together. Unfortunately no, I couldn't find anything on them. And it doesn't help that Luffy didn't know anything about them. The detective paused for a moment as he began to think. This isn't the first time we had a case like this on our hands. With so many villain attacks always happening, there is always that case of a child losing his parents and getting sent to an orphanage. Even with all the heroes this world has to offer, they can't save everyone or be everywhere. People die, and their offspring are left alone to suffer. Luffy told us he was never sent to an orphanage. He said that the people around him were taking care of him until he left the place he grew up, so he's probably been living on his own for a long time. Tsukachi said. He was honestly surprised. The boy had lived so long on his own, as dangerous as the outside was. He couldn't even imagine what that was like for a child. And right there was another can of worms. How did he manage to survive so long on his own? He didn't mean how long he's been out on his own, Ryukyu said with a frown. It looked like Luffy didn't want to tell them how long he'd been out on his own. No, he didn't. Tsukachi shook his head in disappointment. No ordinary child wouldn't be able to survive on the streets this long without some help. But he isn't an ordinary child. Ryukyu pointed out. He seems too strong for a 13-year-old boy. You're right about that. He said his quirk is RBB, which makes his entire body made of RBB. Tsukachi interesting said. He never heard of anyone with a RBB quirk before. A RBB quirk. That would explain how he was able to stretch his arm like that. She thought his quirk was a power-boosting type of how he was able to send the villain flying, but that was not the case. If his body was made of RBB due to his quirk, it has to be an emitter-type quirk. He must have trained incredibly hard to be as powerful as he is now, Ryukyu said in curiosity, trying to figure out how he was so strong at his age. You're right about that. It might be a possibility someone must have trained Luffy at a young age for him to possess such skills. Tsukachi theorizes about the boy's strength. The boy was indeed powerful for his age, that was for sure. He definitely would make a great hero one day. But that wasn't the issue at the moment. They knew that Luffy didn't do anything wrong. He was just trying to help and the law wasn't in his favor. Since he was a minor. And not yet over the age of 18 or enrolled in a school, he wouldn't get put in the full punishments. He would most likely be placed under a few weeks' watch by a pro hero. So if he has no family or a home to go back to, then what do we do with him? She asked the head detective. After what he did, we need to have a pro assigned to watch over him. I've been giving it some thought and I think you might be the best choice, Ryukyu. Tsukachi said to the number 9 hero. You want me to be in charge of the boy's probation? Ryukyu said with a bit of a confused look. Tsukachi took in the look on her face and decided to elaborate. Look, I know that your quirk is relatively powerful and that you have much more experience than most heroes, you are the only person he seems to listen to. He's been outcast from society most of his life. Most rookie heroes at this point would take a look at the kid and think of him as some sort of punk kid who's looking for trouble, and we both know he doesn't deserve that. Tsukachi gave his reason to her. Hell, I wouldn't even put him on probation if it wasn't for the law requiring it. The dragon heroine knew what the detective was saying was very accurate, but inside, she disagreed a little. She didn't have anything against Luffy, he seemed like a good kid, a little rude, but still well behaved. But she feels like she could go and do more. She was one of the top 10 heroes in Japan and had a lot of people expecting a lot from her. With her power, she had a responsibility to go out and do as much as she could as a hero. Making true changes, like All Might had been doing for all his years as a hero. I get that, but the protest died in her throat. She didn't really have a sound argument to say to the detective. With how strong he is and the longing to help others, he's going to be a great hero in the future. Tsukachi continues on. He's brave enough to charge headfirst into danger that he has no idea about, strong and skilled enough to stand his ground against a B-ranked villain, and he cares about the innocent people there that he asked you if they were all right. Maybe spending some time with you is what he needs to help him along his path to become a hero. He finished. Ryukyu processed these words in her head. That was true. If he did want to become a pro-hero someday, then being with a hero would be beneficial, especially if that said hero was in the top, but if that was what she worried about, there were much better heroes than her that could fill that criteria. No, to mention Luffy seems pretty fond of you. If I assign another pro to look after him, chances are he won't be willing to listen to them. Tsukachi added on. Ryukyu couldn't disagree with what he said. Back at the bank and the interrogation room, the only time the teenage boy listened was when she asked him. So having her look after the boy was the smartest choice. Besides, if you're worried about your hero duties, don't worry about that. You've been working extremely hard since you became the number 9 hero this year. Use this chance to take a break from the action for a while. Looking after the kid'll still be important. The detective finished his case and leaned back in his chair with a grin. The hero still looked like she wanted to argue against it, but she couldn't. If it was really that important of a duty, then she'd try it out. It could have been a lot worse, and she was thankful that the kid would be easy to look after. Hopefully. She didn't want to tempt fate like that. A bit too late for that now, though oh well. With a sigh of defeat, she replied. Fine. I'll do it, and the kid. He'll be in safe hands with me. Ryukyu said. Tsukachi let out a laugh. I'd sure hope so. Wouldn't do him any good if he was going to get into trouble again that quick after the attack. Ryukyu nervously echoed the laugh and turned around to head towards the door. I'll go get him, she said, leaving the door. Luffy just finished the food they bought for him. He was just sitting in the lobby, thinking about the questioning he had with the detective. He had told them mostly everything about his old life. He wasn't lying about not knowing anything about his parents and that he lived on his own for most of his life. But the one thing he doesn't understand is that he lied about his name, but the detective quirk didn't go off. Maybe it has something to do with him being Luffy now. If he had to guess, it must have something to do with the god that brought him here. Was this his plan from the beginning? His thoughts were interpreted when he noticed Ryukyu walking up to him. Luffy, I need you to come with me for a moment. Tsukachi wants to speak with you. Ryukyu said to him. He wants to talk to me. Luffy asked the woman. Yeah, he will explain your situation to you, Ryukyu said. As the both of them head to Tsukachi's office. The two entered the office and Tsukachi gave them a warm smile. Thanks for being him, Ryukyu, Tsukachi said to her before he turned to the Straw Hat Boy. How are you feeling now, Luffy, after your meal? Fine. That was all he said. It's pretty late and I won't keep up any more of your time, so I'll make this quick, Tsukachi said, holding his notepad. Because of your actions tonight, you will be placed on probation for the next 2 weeks under the watchful eye of a certain pro-hero. He said to the child. So, which hero am I going to be staying with? Luffy asked out of curiosity. That would be me, Ryukyu said, getting his attention. Luffy was surprised to hear that from her. I'm staying with you. Ryukyu nodded to him. Yes, since I'm the only hero that you actually know, I was assigned to watch over you as probation duty for a few weeks. That means you'll be crashing over at my place for the next 2 weeks. She said. Luffy was surprised by this turn of events. He was going to leave with the woman he just met a few hours ago for the next 2 weeks. After your probation is over, I think the best option for you would be to put you in an orphanage, Tsukachi said, looking at the boy. As we still haven't identified your parents. Luffy just said nothing to this. In fact, he was expecting something like this would happen. Is it okay for us to go now? Ryukyu asked, ready to head home for the night. Yes, everything is accountable and you filled out all the forms. He said to her. Have a good night, detective, Ryukyu said to the detective. You too, and good luck, Tsukachi said, then turned to Luffy. Bye Luffy, I'll see you again in a few weeks. Luffy just gave him a nod and both he and Ryukyu left the station. The two made their way out of the building, as they were walking to Ryukyu's car to head to her place. So Ryukyu, Luffy started a conversation with her. Ryukyu is my hero's name, my real name is Ryuko Tatsuma. Ryuko said to him. Okay Ryuko, if I'm staying with you for the next few weeks, what do we do? If I'm not supposed to be fighting any villains, then does the detective have something that he wants me to do? He asked as they reached her car. Ryuko walked over to her car and opened the door. Those are questions for when we get home, and I know that I can use a rest. Get in, it's not far from here. It'll take 10 minutes at the most. She said, unlocking the door on his side. As soon as she had said those words, he got into the car and fastened your seatbelt. Ryuko put her keys in the engine, starting the car as they drove away from the police station Tatsuma resident. Night after about a 10-minute drive, the two reached a large apartment complex, where Ryuko parked the car in the parking lot. Luffy was the first to get out of the car. "Is this where you live?" he asked, looking at the building. Ryuko got out next and looked at Luffy as he was staring at the complex building. "Yup, it is. Follow me and I'll lead you to my place," she said to the RBB boy. With that said, the two climbed a few flights of stairs with Ryuko leading Luffy to her apartment. They reached their destination on the 5th floor. Ryuko then stopped in front of a door and brought out her house key to unlock the door. "It may not look like much from the outside, but it's really comfortable inside. You can rest up there," she said, opening her apartment up for him. "I'm not complaining as long as I have a roof under my head when I sleep," Luffy said, shunning his shoulder, as he walked inside. "Be sure to take off your sandals before you go farther in," Ryuko told him. Luffy then stops before turning to face her. "Why?" he said in confusion. "Oh, I forgot you grew up in the States. So you don't know anything about Japanese customs." Ryuko remembers that Luffy grew up in America. "You see, in Japan, we tend to not wear our shoes inside of our homes. So remember to take off them whenever you come inside, okay?" Ryuko told him. Luffy just raised an eyebrow at this and just accepted the fact of the Japanese customs, and then took off his sandal before stepping inside her apartment. He began to look around her place with interest. It was a little bigger than he expected, and it also looked pretty comfortable place to live in. "It looks nice," Luffy said to her. Ryuko walked in of him to the living room. "Thanks. I haven't had much time to clean because of my hero tends to keep me busy," she said with a nervous laugh. "Well, since we're both tired and haven't gotten any decent sleep in the past 24 hours, I think we can both agree to just rest for now. There is a guest room that's usually never used. I do apologize if it's a bit messy, I just never have any visitors coming before," she explained, with a hint of tiredness and resignation in her voice. "It's fine, Ryuko. I don't really mind sleeping on the floor if I have to," Luffy replied. "Besides, it would be real crappy of me if I wasn't grateful for what you did for me, so thanks," he said, not wanting to be ungrateful to the person who took him in. "Ah, it's nothing, I've lived alone for a while now, and I'm probably not gonna have any other uses for those rooms. This place is a bit too big for just one person to live in after all." Ryuko continued on as she walked down a hallway with Luffy following shortly after. In the hallway, there were multiple doors on the sides, 2 on the left and right. The first room on the left has a spare bed that hasn't been used. There might be some dust on it for the past weeks that no one has entered, so make sure you shake it off the blanket before you sleep. Ryuko pointed out the room and then walked down the hallway to another room. "Meanwhile, she continued, am going to need to crash on my bed, and pass out." She leaned on the door, which opened without a creak, and threw the door shut as she entered the room. Luffy stares at the door for a while because of such an unusual action. He can only assume that she must have been really tired. Deciding that things would go back to normal in the morning, he entered the room. Walking into the room, it didn't bother him that the room was somewhat smaller than what his old one looked like. A white mattress was propped up from a wooden base, with pillows and blankets draped on them. A large wooden desk sat across the far corner of the room, with a mirror and drawer across it. The walls around it were painted in a dark blue color, and the ceiling was painted as a starry sky, while a drawing of a full silver room, with a clear bulb in the middle. Luffy walked across the room to the open blinds, grabbed the small thread, and pulled down, closing it. The light that was entering the room had been blocked, and he was once again shrouded in darkness. What a day! Luffy thinking about today's events. "I guess I'll get to bed myself," he said, walking back to the bed, and pulled the covers open. Heeding Ryuko's warning about the dust, he dragged it off of the bed and flapped it once. He placed the blankets back on the empty mattress, then took off his straw hat and vest, putting them on the dresser next to the bed. He lifted his feet to the ground and lay down on the bed. He placed the sheets on top of himself and drifted into slumber. One Piece plus My Hero Academia crossover Chapter 3, New Life and Teaching Haki. Tatsuma resident, night from villain attacks early in the morning to now housing one of the strangest kids she'd ever met. The number 9 dragon heroine certainly wasn't feeling the day. Coming off of a sleep-deprived night, she spent the time sleeping on a certain question: how the heck was she supposed to look after a teenage boy for the next 2 weeks? First of all, what was she even supposed to do? The detective told her to take a break for 2 weeks, yet how was she supposed to? Normally, her version of a break was to get out of the house, turn into her dragon form, fly out to a remote beach, and relax at a small wooden house that she had built herself. She was fairly sure that it illegal, but nobody knew it was there. It was a win in her book. Ryuko could hardly leave the kid at home and go and relax there, as tempting as it sounded. That would just be immoral of her and messed up in so many ways. What did Tsukachi mean by relax anyway? She almost wished she could go out and back to doing her work again. But she knew that the kid didn't ask for this either. He never wanted to be arrested and sent to the police station. He would have probably been happy with life back the way he was used to. Ryuko knew that she would, being put in his situation. It was so clear now why this was so heavily regarded as a difficult hero duty, and why the bane of all caretakers was such a widely discussed issue. She, in all honesty, didn't have a clue what to do. Her regular day was just going out, patrolling, resolving minor cases and the occasional villain attack, and going back home and chilling. Without heroics, she literally had no plan for the day. What was the best way to go about it? Take the kid out to the city and have fun there. For any other teenager, that would be a good idea, but for Luffy, he is a foreigner and doesn't know much about Japan. Maybe she could take him out on a tour of the city. He also doesn't have any other clothes except the ones he was wearing. So she would probably have to go and buy him some new clothes for him to wear. The option was on the table but depended on what Tsukachi had planned for him after that. He just wasn't going to let him return back to regular life wandering around place to place. He arranged to send him to an orphanage when his probation is over. But was that something the Straw Hat Boy wanted? Then it just hit Ryuko in the head. God, she was dumb. Why not just ask the teen what he wanted to do? As long as it wasn't against the law, they technically could do whatever they wanted. It would save her the potential hassle of boring the teenager to death, and he'd be happy. Why didn't she think of this sooner? Maybe it was because she was sleep-deprived as all hell. That wasn't even a maybe. She hasn't gotten sleep in the past day and a half. Listen to your own advice, Ryuko. Leave the issues to the morning. She stopped thinking, closed her eyes, and instantly lost consciousness. Tatsuma resident morning. The small bedroom was filled with a dull light that was seeping through closed blinds, along with a bed that hosted a teenage boy covered in sheets, slowly opening his eyes. The small light was a welcome change from the first few times that he has regained consciousness when the sun was shining directly on his face. Morning already. Luffy slowly opened his eyes, rubbing them. He tossed the sheets aside and climbed out of the bed. Recalling the events of yesterday, and feeling more energized than he had in a long while, Luffy moved towards the blinds and pulled the yarn up. He could see the sun closing in on the horizon, covering part of the sky in a light shade of orange. Based on the sky, he had estimated that he slept for 6 to 7 hours, a very healthy sleep in his mind. He then put back on his vest and straw hat, having it rest on his back and hanging from his neck again. Luffy opened the door out of his room, and took a glimpse into the MSTR bedroom. The sheets were half removed, and there was no one laying in the bed. Making another assumption that the Ryuko was currently awake, he made his way down the hallway to a light sound coming from the living room, and a very familiar smell coming from the kitchen. Walking into the room, he sees Ryuko was busy in the kitchen, and likely did not notice him coming down the hallway. Morning. Luffy spoke up, getting her attention. The hero turned around and found the teenage boy standing in front of the kitchen. Ah, good evening. I warmed up some instant ramen in case you're hungry. If you aren't, then that's fine too, you can eat it whenever you feel like it. Instant ramen for breakfast. Not the first time he's done that. Back in his old life he used to eat instant ramen for breakfast, whenever he was lazy enough not to cook any real food. Food is food, makes no difference to me. Luffy said, shrugging his shoulder, not caring about what he eats. Ryuko let out a low laugh. I see, that's good to hear. She then took the bowl of food and handed it to him, which he accepts. Luffy quickly ate the food that was given to him, and while it certainly wasn't much to fill him up, he was going to complain either. After a few minutes of silence, with Ryuko watched the TV screen in the living room. She was watching something that looks like a news report, of another hero fighting a few villains last night. On it was a very large man with an equally muscular and well-defined physique. He has chiseled features on his face, a strong jawline and pronounced cheekbones, and busy eyebrows. He has short blonde hair, swept backward, with two distinct tufts that stick up above his head, leaning slightly to each side. His strong features regularly cast a dark shadow over his face, hiding everything but his bright blue eyes. His hero costume consisted of a skin-tight blue bodysuit decorated with a red symbol that somewhat resembles a Y, design with a white diamond at its center, with white lines connected to it that trace from his chest to his back shoulders, the lines trimmed with the aforementioned red symbol. The symbol appeared to have wings on the side that ran from atop his torso before ending around his back, over which was a similar red and white design absent of the white diamond. Large white patches lined with red covered each side of his hips before ending at his lower thighs, and he wore a gold belt that had a silver buckle with red eyes. His forearm sleeves were colored in gold that each had white lines covered in blue accents over his wrists, and had spiked fins on the sides of his arms. His feet were covered in shin-length gold boots trimmed with white and red accents. Ha ha ha. Have no fear, because I am here. The man laughed, while flexing his muscles before punching them all into SBMSN. Justice has been served. He yelled, raising his left arm in the air, to show his victory. Last night, a gang of villains who have been terrorizing the streets of Shibuya was stopped by the number one hero himself, All Might. The newsman said, as news reporters were questioning the hero. Over 35 villains were arrested and will, All Might. Luffy said, looking at the screen from the kitchen table. He looks pretty strong, not One Piece strong but still pretty tough in own right. And he defeated 35 villains single-handedly without even breaking a sweat. Hey, Ryuko. Luffy said. She turned her from the screen and, lifting a small remote at the same time, pressed the volume button to turn the volume down. What's up? Ryuko asked. Who is that? Luffy pointed at the screen, showing an image of All Might. With a confused expression on her face, she stared at him. What? You really don't know who he is? Ryuko asked him in confusion. Luffy just shook his head to her, which made her eyes slightly widen in surprise. How does he not know who All Might is? Ryuko thought with a raised brow. All Might was the number one hero and considered the greatest hero in the world. He was well known by everyone, even people in other countries knew who he was, especially America since he went abroad over there. So it come to Ryuko's surprise when Luffy asked her who All Might was. Ryuko just shook her head out of her funk to answer his question. That person right there is our symbol of peace and the number one hero in all of Japan, All Might. She said with a bit of admired in her voice. All Might, huh? Luffy said as his eyes returned to the TV. Ryuko just looked at the teen and sees that he doesn't look that much impressed. Luffy, how do not know who All Might is? Ryuko curiously asked. Am I supposed to know who he is? Luffy asked her in confusion. Well, no, but it kind of strange for someone your age not knowing who All Might is. Ryuko said with a raised eyebrow. Luffy just shrugged his shoulder. Well, I'm not really that into heroes like most people are. Not only that, he just arrived in this world yesterday, so of course he doesn't know about the people in it. So he doesn't care much for heroes. Ryuko thought being a little disappointing. All Might was a well-beloved hero to the public and a lot of people looked up to him. Ryuko herself wasn't that much of a big fan of his, but she respects him as a fellow hero. But Luffy's expression shows he was the least bit interested in him at all. What do they mean by #1 hero? Luffy asked her another question. That's his hero rank. Ryuko said to him. Rank? Luffy said in confusion. Each professional heroes are officially ranked by taking several factors into account, such as the level of strength they have displayed, the number of cases they have solved, their general popularity, and their overall contribution to society. Ryuko explains to him. The Hero Public Safety Commission reviews the activity of all the heroes in the country over the past year and uses a formula to organize and review all the aforementioned factors. The results are presented as the new hero rankings. She finished. Huh. Luffy said, thinking about everything he was told. So if this All Might guy is #1, then he must be incredibly popular. You have no idea. Ryuko said with a smile. Being in the top 10 rankings can make that happen. You also said something about him being a symbol of peace. Luffy asked. Yes, well, ever since All Might made his debut as a hero, the crime rate in Japan has dropped dramatically. Ryuko said still remembers when All Might made his appearances in the hero world. Criminals aren't as bold now as they were back then due to All Might present. Japan has the lowest crime rate in the entire world thanks to All Might heroic efforts. They were lucky enough to have such a great hero in their country. But yet, that doesn't seem to stop most of the villains from still causing trouble for everyone. Luffy said, remembering last night events. That guy from last night wasn't sacred at all. The dragon heroine just sighed, seeing where he was going with this. You're not wrong. There are still some who aren't that much intimidated by the sight of All Might and most other well-known heroes. She said in agreement. That because they're either brave, stupid, or just have some ulterior motives. Luffy said in annoyance. Even if All Might is the symbol of peace, that won't stop people from breaking the law. Not only that, but has anyone thought about what would happen when he's no longer a hero? Luffy said, see the bigger picture. A world without All Might in it. The dragon heroine, though, in wonder at the symbol of peace no longer around to keep criminals at bay and inspiring hope for the next generation. Have a symbol of peace doesn't necessarily mean peace. Because there will always be some kind of selfish scumbags out there preying on the weak and helpless. Ryuko can relate to that feeling. There were some criminals that have surrounded just because she made an appearance, but there were some who were still willing to fight against her. The same can be said for any hero, and All Might wasn't an exception to that rule. And she believes that wasn't going to change anything time soon. Speaking of ranking, since you're a hero, so what's your rank? Luffy asked in curiosity, changing the conversation. Ryuko paused for a moment, before nervously laughing. Well, I don't want to barrage or anything, but I'm ranked the #9 hero. She said. Luffy's eyes widened in surprise from hearing that. Wait, you're ranked 9th. Which means you're 9th best hero in the county. He said in shock. Yes, I was made into the #9 hero during this year's rankings. Ryuko said to him. But despite that, I don't feel like I earned it. She now had a weak smile on her face. What do you mean? Luffy asked her. My quirk lets me turn into dragon and it's incredibly useful in a number of situations, but I just don't feel like I have the right to be named one of the top 10 heroes. Ryuko said with her eyes closed and in frown. I'm pretty sure there are other heroes more suitable than me to be the #9 rank. Don't you think you're selling yourself a little short? Luffy said to the heroine. Huh? Ryuko said in confusion. I mean, you have an amazing power and you managed to work hard enough to get into the top 10, that not something most heroes can do. So don't say that you don't earn your spot as the #9 hero. Because it would be an insult to everyone who believes in you. The Straw Hat Boy told her with a serious expression. Ryuko just stared at the boy in shock after hearing that. What he said did make sense, 'cause people do believe in heroes, especially the ones in the top, so saying she didn't deserve being rank 9 is pretty much insulting all of hero fans and supporters. You're right, sorry I said that. I wasn't really thinking straight. Ryuko said, feeling a little embarrassed for being scolded by a teenager. It's fine, it happens to the best of us. I mean, you're only human. Luffy said, returning back to his ramen before another thought came to his mind. Why a hero society? What? Ryuko replied with confusion. Luffy looked to Ryuko, his expression now a neural curiosity. When so many people get powers like this at once, you'd think they would just keep it for themselves and become greedy and transparent. A lot of people would think the world would just end once everyone got power like that all at once. He pursed his lips a bit and thought of this crazy superhuman society. What gave everyone the idea that heroes were the way to go? Ryuko needed a moment to think about that, as wanted to give him her best answer. Well, it didn't really happen overnight. The way I remember my grandfather telling it, Japan was locked in a feudal state the first few years quirks were around. A lot of people just went crazy with that power, and even more crime syndicates wanted to use that time as an advantage. There were a lot of top criminals who took the spotlight during that time. Apocalypse, free fire. There was even a rumor of a guy who could steal quirks and give them to someone else. She explained to the RBB boy. It sounds like chaos. Luffy said with a frown. Almost like the One Piece world, but on a smaller scale. It was. In fact, it was almost the end of society as a whole. Ryuko said, remembering the history of the Dark Ages with quirks appeared into their world. That's when we needed heroes the most. And people rose to the occasion. Everyone imagined what it would be like to have superpowers. To do the right thing when they had those powers. They had read it in comics and all that. Most of the time, people said they probably wouldn't do something like that when push came to shove. The dragoness laughed a bit to herself. But then, when the world was in peril, people did what they said was impossible and stepped up to the plate. They fought. They battled. And they became heroes. And the idea that you could use your powers to just help people in need really just expanded and become such a noble idea. Nobody said it had to be that way. It happened and all of humanity embraced it. The dragon heroine sighed, as old memories of her grandfather went through her mind. You asked why we went with a hero society. I think the better question, kid, is why not? We were all given a choice when we got our quirks on how to use them. And I think, naturally, we all wanted to use our powers for good and to save people, like the heroes from comics. I know I can't speak for everyone, because there are bad people out there. She hoped Luffy didn't notice the drop of tone in her voice at that. But when you have the power to help someone in peril, doesn't it feel natural to just use your power to protect that person? To help them when they need it most? Luffy pursed his lips for a moment and nodded. Yeah, I get that feeling. More than you can imagine. He looked down and Ryuko saw a flash of anger in his eyes. But I also get the consequences that come with thinking like that. Ryuko frowned at the sudden swap of anger that Luffy had displayed. Not out of frustration, but more out of worried curiosity. She had seen enough in her career as a hero to know when someone was holding something back. But before she could ask Luffy exactly what was bothering him, the boy quickly lost the glare to his look and went back to eating his food. After a few minutes of silence, Luffy finished his remaining ramen, and he set the bowl down. Now well rested and mostly filled up, it was finally time to start his second day in this new world. Speaking of, what was he going to do today? Ryuko hadn't given him a schedule or something to do after he woke up. She just told him that these types of problems are left to the morning. Which was understandable conceding how tired she was last night. So Ryuko, what are we going to do today? You really didn't say anything to me last night. Luffy said, getting her attention again. Ryuko grabbed the remote and turned off the TV. Tsukachi never gave me a specific list of things that we need to do, so really it's all up to you. I'm just supposed to be watching over you as a responsible adult. Wait, I have to decide. I don't even know my way around here. Luffy exclaimed his protest after he had the burden of the schedule passed on to him. There's your idea, then. Why not take a look around the city? The weather is perfect right now. During the summer, nighttime is always the best time to go out. The heroine suggests. He thought about it for a bit. If he was going to be living in this world for the rest of his life, it probably was a good idea to know his way around. It would be a good idea for me to get to know the city, then stay in here all day. Luffy said. If that's the plan, then I will get dressed in something that isn't my hero costume. Ryuko said, getting up from the couch. She then turned around and eyed Luffy's clothes. He was still wearing his red vest and shorts that he had on last night. And also, Luffy, you might want to change your clothes. It's not a good idea to stay in those dirty clothes. What clothes? I don't have any other clothes except these. Luffy said, pointing out the obvious, with his arms crossed. Ryuko then blinked, as passed off her assessment of the clothes of the Straw Hat Boy, until another thought crossed her mind. Did she even get him any clothes? Now that she thinks about it, all they ever did was head to the police station and drove back to her apartment. Oh, right. Ryuko said with a sweat drop. So I guess the first order of business is to get me some new clothes. Luffy suggests. Yes, that would be the smart thing to do. So, I'm going to go change real quick and then we'll head out and hit the city. Ryuko said to him, before walking back to her room. Clothes shopping. Truth be told, she was never one to be interested in fashion, and that statement would be heavily frowned upon by many other female pro-heroes, but it was the truth. What was the point of getting all these fancy outfits when all it does is draw attention to you, and makes you feel super uncomfortable? Right. Luffy said to her. Muzutafu Streets, afternoon, are you sure you are okay with me buying this many clothes? Luffy said, holding a bunch of bags of new clothes. It's fine, besides I have more money than I know what to do with it. Ryuko said, waving her hand. Because of her hero work and being in the top 10, she gets paid a lot more money than other heroes. So buying some clothes for the boy wasn't that much of a big deal for her. Several hours of shopping had passed and the pair were walking around the city. Luffy was walking next to a somewhat disguised hero in public. Ryuko, who sports a regular shirt over a white jacket, hood pulled up, and black pants, minus her usual dragon appendages over her right eyes, was walking past civilians. Not a single one of them recognized her as a hero. The sight of an adult woman with a teenage boy did not draw any attention whatsoever, as they just dismissed it as a regular mother and child traveling the city. Which was a good thing for both of them. It wasn't in their interests to make everyone stare at them and notice them. She took the young boy down the busy street, a different one compared to where the villain attack was last night, to a store that was labeled with a bright flashing light. Because of all the destroyed buildings, construction workers that are paid by the government are repairing them. With their quirks made for the job, it should take a few weeks to get it the way back it was, but for now, we need to avoid it. Ryuko had explained to him when he asked about it. Wait, I thought that heroes can only use their quirk in public. Luffy asked in confusion. Yes, but if a person has a special quirk license they can use their powers freely without breaking the law. Just as long as don't abuse their abilities. Ryuko explains to him. This got the boy's attention. How does one get one of those quirk license? Luffy asked curiosity. There are a number of ways to get one, but the most common way to get one is to go to a hero school. Ryuko answered. Hero school. There are schools for heroes. Luffy said in confusion. Yes. There are multiple heroes schools throughout the county, to help train kids around your age and turn them into pro-heroes. She explained. Hero schools aren't all about education, even though that's heavily stressed. To make students into the best heroes they can be, they need to know how to act in certain situations, be it flat ground, or city areas, and how to catch various villains in them. They also learn to improve their quirks beyond their limits. Ryuko finished. Luffy was interested in what she said. Not the part about the hero school and what they do, but the quirk license. If he had something like that, then he could use his powers as much as he likes without getting into trouble. Have you thought about joining one yourself, Luffy? Ryuko asked the boy. No, not yet. Luffy shook his head at her. Become a hero. The idea of being one doesn't seem like a bad idea, but for some reason, it didn't feel right with him. Well, take your time, you have 2 years before you reach the age for you to enroll in one. Ryuko said as they made their way into a new store. The store was small and had people of varying sizes and appearances hustling around, grabbing clothes off the racks, placing clothes against them, trying on sizes, and a massive line of people, holding items, ready to purchase them. How much stuff is she going to buy for me? Luffy thought as he was looking around the store. This will be the last clothes store we'll visit, after that we'll get something to eat. Ryuko said to him. Sound good to me. Luffy said, starting to feel hungry again. All that shopping and walking build up his appetite. Family restaurant, afternoon. Luffy and Ryuko were now in a family restaurant eating lunch Ryuko bought for them, after finishing Luffy's clothes shopping an hour ago. There were multiple people there to eat with their family members and have a good time. They were sitting in a booth next to a window. Luffy ordered 10 tomato-baked cod with bulgur, lemon, and almond tabbouleh, and he drank a cola. Ryuko was a bit surprised at how much food the teen could eat. She just assumed that it has something to do with his quirk and left it at that. Ryuko ordered a steak and pasta toss plate and she was drinking iced tea. They were taking a bit whole eating until they finished their meals. That was a good meal. Thanks for paying for my lunch, Ryuko. Luffy said with a satisfied look on his face. No problem. Like I said, everything on me. She said, drinking her tea. You knew, it's almost like we're on a date, Ryuko said to him. This causes the boy to blush at the idea and look the other way. Please don't say anything like that. Luffy firmly said to the woman. Ryuko just giggled at the boy's reaction and found it pretty cute. But all joking aside, Ryuko had a wondering question that she had been meaning to ask the RBB boy. Say, Luffy, can I ask you a quick question? Ryuko asks him, getting his attention. Sure, what is it? Luffy asks, looking back at her. Yesterday, when you fought that villain, you were beating him pretty easily, even knowing he was a B-ranked, Ryuko said, curious. Luffy just raised an eyebrow. He wasn't that strong. He shrugs his shoulder. Well, seeing how strong you alright are, it makes sense that you would think like that, Ryuko said before getting to the point. Anyway, I wanted to ask who trained you. Luffy just looked at her and wondered what she was getting at. You seem to be incredibly strong for your age and skillful enough to fight a dangerous criminal. That's not something a child can do without some kind of training. Ryuko said to Luffy. So, I'm a little curious about how you have gotten so strong at such a young age. If you don't want to answer, then that's fine too. The last thing she wanted to do was focus something out of him and have him trust her less. Luffy thought for a moment and just sighed to himself. I don't mind telling you, and besides, it's the least I can do for everything you done for me, Luffy said to the dragon girl. He felt a little guilty having Ryuko buy all of this stuff. She began nothing but nice to him the moment he met her, so telling her about his ability wouldn't be much of a problem. So what do you want to know? Luffy asked with his arms crossed. How did you get this strong? Ryuko asked her first question. Simple, I trained. Luffy bluntly said. Ryuko felt a little dumb for asking that question. It makes sense that someone reached that level of power by training. Okay, next question, Ryuko said, changing the question. Who was the one who trained you? Well, the first person to train me was my grandpa, Luffy said, remembering the time's grandfather much to his horror as those were unpleasant memories. "You have a grandfather?" Ryuko asked, being a bit surprised to hear that he had family. "Yeah, but he isn't alive anymore," Luffy said, lying as she didn't need to know the truth. "But my grandpa's training methods were pretty difficult and very hard," he said, having an uncomfortable look on his face. "What kind of training did you go through?" Ryuko asked as she noticed that look on his face. "When I was only 5 years old he threw me down into a bottomless ravine and I had to climb my way out of there. Then there were a few times he left me jungle at the end of the night where I had to survive there a couple of days and find my way back home all on my own. There were other times he sent me sailing off in the sky while being strpped to a bunch of balloons. And when I was a little bit older he had me fight against multiple wild animals in the forest, and times where I had spar against him without rest or until he thought I had enough," Luffy said, shivering as he remembered his training PRD with his grandfather. Ryuko couldn't help but look horrified at what Luffy's grandfather put him through as a child and at such a young age. So less. From what it sounds like, the training that Luffy was put through nearly killed him on a number of occasions. She was just wondering how his grandfather wasn't arrested for child abuse. "Luffy, I'm so sorry you went through something like that," Ryuko said, giving the boy an expression of sadness and pity. "No," Luffy answered with a nonchalant tone. Ryuko was shocked to hear Luffy's answer with such a calm manner. He did not hate his grandfather for what he put him through. "Don't get me wrong, I hate the training he put him through. But my grandfather did it because he wanted me to be a strong enough man to protect myself and the people closest to me," Luffy said to her, which made Ryuko even more shocked to see how he just brushed out his grandfather's nightmarish training like it was nothing. Before Ryuko could question him again, Luffy continued where he left off in his story. "Then after that, I met this old man 2 years ago, who helped develop my strength even further," Luffy said, thinking about the Dark King Silver's Rayleigh. However, he didn't mean Luffy's training with Hyogoro in the Udon prison, where Hyogoro helped Luffy Mstr Ryuo Haki for his showdown with Kaido. An old man? Ryuko thought. Who was this old man? She asked in curiosity. "His name is Silver's Rayleigh, the Dark King," Luffy said to her. "Dark King? Is that the name of a hero? Whoever he is, he must be very skilled if he is able to make Luffy this strong. Why did Rayleigh decide to train you?" Ryuko asked. Luffy thought back to his memories of his old life when he wanted One Piece and Luffy's memories to give her the best possible answer. "It's because I remind Rayleigh of someone he knows in the past," Luffy said to Ryuko. This person he met was the one who changed Rayleigh's life and turned it into the greatest moments he ever experienced. During his youth, Rayleigh stole a ship due to his house burning down and needing a place to live. Sometime after that, he met Gold Roger, who was impressed by the ship. Roger said that it was a fated meeting and asked Rayleigh to join him. Rayleigh simply laughed at his invitation and declined his offer. Despite his initial refusal, Rayleigh later engaged in piracy and became the first mate of the Roger pirates. After Roger's execution, many years have passed and he meets Luffy. Rayleigh is reminded of Roger by Luffy and his behavior. They obviously got along very well. For Rayleigh to train Luffy was likely reliving his days with Gold Roger. Rayleigh trained him because he saw Luffy inherited Roger's will. Ryuko saw the look on the boy's face and knew it was starting to get personal and didn't want to press further. "I see. So how did he train you?" Ryuko wanted to know what type of training he did. "We spent the last 2 years on an abandoned island with a lot of dangerous animals, that were much more strong than me," Luffy said, horrifying Ryuko. According to Rayleigh, when he and Luffy arrived on the island of Rosakana, there were over 500 beasts living there that Luffy would not be able to defeat unless he got stronger. "What? Why would he bring you to such a dangerous place in the first place?" Ryuko shouted a little with a worried look on her face. "To help me grow stronger. And besides, he was there looking after me for the next year and a half to teach me the basics of Haki. After I mastered them enough, Rayleigh left me alone on the island for half a year to finish my training on my own," Luffy explained to her, which only made her even more worried. He just left a child on an abandoned island for half a year. Ryuko stared at Luffy with widened eyes trying to process what she heard. What kind of irresponsible adult would do that to a child? Wait. Hockey. What in the world is hockey? Ryuko got over her shock and asked him a different question. Luffy, what do you mean by he teaching you, hockey? She was still confused by the word. Oh, that's right, people in this world don't know anything about hockey. Luffy thought, drinking more of his soda before putting it back down. Ryuko, I'm about to tell you more of my abilities. So listen carefully because I won't say them again, he said to the dragon heroine. Ryukyu immediately paid close attention to what Luffy was going to say. First off, hockey is not a quirk but a technique I learned a while back. Luffy said to her. It's a technique then. Meaning anyone can learn it? Ryuko mentally asked with intrigue. Hockey is a mysterious power that all living beings in the world are capable of learning, however, most people do not notice it or fail to awaken it. From what Rayleigh told me, you can awaken it with intense training or incredible shock. Although there are a lot of ways to try to awaken it. Luffy answered with a serious expression, recalling the info his teacher gave out. Shock. As in traumatic kinda shock? Ryuko asked with a bit of a disturbed look on her face to hear one of the ways to awaken such a power. Yeah, something like that. Hockey is a manifestation of a person's own willpower and allows a person to utilize their own spiritual energy for various purposes. There are 3 different types of hockey. Luffy said to her while holding up 3 fingers. Really? What are they? Ryuko asked honestly, becoming much far more interested in hockey than she realized. Presence, fighting spirit, and intimidation. Or to be more precise, we call them observation, armament, and conqueror's hockey. Luffy proclaimed, repeating verbatim of what he learned from the anime, as Ryuko slightly raised an eyebrow in confusion at what Luffy meant. Observation, armament, and conquerors. Could